AITA for making my ex regret dumping me for a rich guy? The night she left, the sky was clear, but I swear I felt the entire world collapsing around me. It's not what you think, Madison said, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder. It was a line I'd heard in movies, in stories other people told, but I never imagined it would come from the lips of the woman I planned on growing old with. I stood motionless in the middle of our small one-bedroom apartment, the one we'd decorated together with furniture we'd painstakingly assembled from flat-pack boxes, a place that was full of us. Every corner held a memory, and in that moment, they all felt like lies. Then explain it to me, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. She sighed, as if I were the one creating the problem. I've met someone. Of course. It always starts like that. My chest tightened, but I nodded. I wanted to hear it all. I needed to. His name is Blake. He's different. Different. The word stabbed me. Different. How? I asked, and then she delivered the final blow. He has stability. He has a plan. He has a life to offer. I felt something inside me shatter. And what was I? A project? A phase? I didn't say a word. She finally met my gaze, and in her eyes, there was no guilt, only resolve. You have your dreams, she said softly, but I need something real. That was worse than any shout, because she wasn't angry or confused. She had already made her choice, and it wasn't me. I remember laughing. Not a happy laugh, of course. It was that hollow, bitter sound that escapes when the pain is too much to contain. So, you're trading me for some guy with money. She frowned. It's not just about the money, but we both knew it was. Blake had a sleek German sedan that cost more than my last 2 years of income combined. A downtown condo with a view. Weekend trips I could only see on social media. I had my aging MacBook Pro, a shaky freelance career, and dreams that weren't paying the bills yet. I'm sorry, she finally said. I'm so sorry. 2 words that fixed nothing. 2 words that were months too late. She picked up her suitcase. It wasn't big. I realized she must have packed it earlier, while I was out. That small detail hurt more than the goodbye itself. How long? I asked. She paused at the door. A couple of months. 2 months. 2 months of living with me, kissing me, telling me she loved me, all while she was building her escape route. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to demand 1,000 answers, but I didn't. Because in that instant, I understood a terrible truth. It didn't matter anymore. Take care, she said, and walked out. Just like that. The click of the door closing was so final, like a curtain dropping on my life without any warning. I was alone. The silence was deafening. I walked through the apartment like a ghost in my own life, touching the sofa where we'd binged shows, the coffee mug still holding the faint stain of her lipstick, the framed photo on the wall where we were smiling, completely oblivious. What a fool, I whispered. I slid down to the floor. The tears didn't come right away. It was more of an emptiness, a black hole swallowing everything. Then the questions started, one after another. When did she stop loving me? When did I stop being enough? Was I just a placeholder all along? I didn't sleep that night, or the next, or the one after that. My mind replayed the scene over and over, searching for a clue I had missed, a sign. And yes, looking back, there were signs. The way she'd get quiet when I talked about my projects, her fading interest in my ideas, the nights out with friends that now seemed suspicious. But I had chosen to trust her. Because that's what love does. It doesn't make you blind. It makes you a believer, and that makes you vulnerable. Days bled into a week, and reality began to sink in. She wasn't coming back. This wasn't a fight or a break. It was an ending. And the worst part wasn't losing her. The worst part was how she had made me feel. Inadequate, small, and utterly replaceable. One night, scrolling through my inbox with zero enthusiasm, I found something I had ignored for days. An email from a major tech firm I'd admired from a distance, about an opportunity one had applied for months ago and forgotten. Before, I would have been ecstatic. At that moment, I barely reacted. I almost deleted it, almost let the one thing that could change everything slip away. But something inside me, a tiny, stubborn ember, stopped me. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was anger, maybe it was the desperate need to prove her wrong. I opened the message. As I read it, for the first time since she left, I felt something other than pain. It wasn't happiness. It was fire. A slow, dark fire building in my gut. You're going to regret this. I murmured to the empty room. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I knew. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something that no one, especially not her, could ever imagine. And the cruelest irony was that by the time she finally came back, I would no longer be the man she left behind. The first few days after she left were a blur of numb routine and internal chaos. I'd wake up without wanting to, work without focus, and eat without tasting anything. I was an automaton, going through the motions as if the part of me that felt things had been shut down. But that one email, stayed open on my laptop screen like a doorway I was afraid to walk through. The opportunity was immense, a high-stakes, international project with a company known for innovation. Getting a foot in the door there was next to impossible for a freelancer like me, with no industry connections and no certainties. I let out a dry, ironic smile, remembering her word. You have your dreams, but I need something real. Fine. I was going to turn my dreams into something so real, so solid, it would be painful to look at. That night, I didn't stay awake because of sadness. I stayed awake because I was working. For the first time in weeks, my mind wasn't trapped in the past. It was sharp, focused, obsessed. I dove into the project proposal, analyzing every detail, every requirement, every unspoken expectation. It wasn't just work anymore. It was a silent declaration of war against everything she said I was, and against the part of me that had started to believe it. Days turned into weeks. My life became a cycle of coffee, code, concepts, failures, and revisions. I lost track of time. My friends started to worry. Hey man, you good? You've gone dark, my friend Ryan texted. Working on something. I typed back, the shortest possible answer because I had no mental energy for anything else. Everything was secondary to the one singular goal, to prove them all wrong. Not just her, but myself. I realized at some point that her betrayal wasn't what hurt the most. It was the fact that deep down, a part of me had agreed with her. I had doubted myself long before she said the words out loud. That was what needed to change. Early one morning, reviewing my proposal for the 100th time, I paused. I saw my reflection in the dark screen. Deep-set dark circles, the start of a stressed beard, and eyes that were exhausted but held a new kind of light. You're not him anymore, I whispered. It wasn't a comfort, it was a warning. I hit send on the proposal, and then there was only silence. The days of waiting were excruciating, and that's when the past tried to creep back in. A notification popped up on my phone. Her name. My heart gave a powerful, treacherous jolt. I opened the message. Hey, how have you been? That was it. After everything, just a casual check-in. I stared at the screen for a long time. There were a million things I wanted to say, so much anger I wanted to unleash, but I didn't reply. I closed the app. I knew, instinctively, that responding now would be a step backward, and I was done moving backward. 2 days later, an email landed in my inbox. We were impressed with your proposal and would like to schedule a follow-up interview. My breath caught in my throat. I read it 3 times. 4. 5. It was real. It wasn't the finish line, but the door had just been thrown wide open. The interview was a grueling gauntlet of technical questions, whiteboarding problems, and high-pressure system design scenarios. In the past, I would have been a wreck, but this time, I was strangely calm. I had already faced worse. Nothing they could ask would cut deeper than what I had already been through, and that made me dangerous. I answered every question without hesitation. When it was over, one of the senior engineers on the panel smiled faintly. You have a certain intensity, he said. It's rare. I just nodded, but inside, that slow-burning fire flared brighter. The next few days were a quiet torture until the final email arrived. We are pleased to extend you an offer. I read the words, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated release. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. I did it, I whispered. It wasn't just a job. It was validation. It was proof that I wasn't broken, that I wasn't insufficient, that she had been wrong. But the strange thing was, in that moment of victory, the need to tell her had completely vanished. And just when I thought I was finally getting my footing, another notification came through. Madison again. But this time, the message was different. Can we please talk? 3 words that changed the tone completely. Please. Before, I would have dropped everything. I would have craved the chance to hear her out, to get answers. But now, I just looked at the screen, feeling no rush, no anxiety, no need. And that, more than the job offer, was how I knew how much I had truly changed. Still, I replied, no, a single word, direct, cold, and final. I set my phone aside, and for the first time since she left, I felt something that had nothing to do with her. Peace. But the story wasn't over. I didn't know it then, but her perfect new world with Blake was about to implode. And when it did, she would come looking for me, but she wouldn't find the man she'd left behind. She would find someone else entirely, someone who was no longer willing to be anyone's second choice. My first day at the new job felt less like an achievement and more like stepping into a different dimension. Gleaming open-plan offices, confident people moving with purpose, conversations buzzing with acronyms I'd only seen on tech blogs. Everything was bigger, faster, and more demanding. And for the first time in my life, so was I. I won't lie. At first, I felt a flicker of imposter syndrome. Not about my skills, but about whether I truly belonged there. That old, insidious thought echoed in my mind. You're not enough. But this time, I didn't let it take hold, because now I had proof. I had earned my place here with nothing but hard work, obsession, and pain that I had weaponized into fuel. No one could take that from me. I threw myself into the work completely. I learned faster, stayed later, and pushed harder than anyone. I didn't want to just fit in, I wanted to excel. My new boss, David, started to notice. You're hungry, he told me one afternoon. That's not something you can teach. I just nodded, not explaining where that hunger came from. It wasn't simple ambition. It was something darker, deeper. It was the primal need to never again feel the way I did that night, on the floor of an empty apartment, staring at a closed door. Weeks turned into months, and a strange thing happened. Madison started to occupy less and less space in my head. The thought of her didn't disappear, but the sting was gone. She was becoming a memory, a cautionary tale attached to an old version of myself. One Friday night, after my team and I closed a major project milestone, we all went out to celebrate. A steakhouse where the reservations were booked a month in advance, with warm lighting and drinks that I previously couldn't have justified buying. And there I was, at that table, laughing and engaged, completely present. At one point, while the others were talking, I fell silent, just observing the scene, and a thought hit me. This is the life she wanted. But the strangest part was, I no longer felt any desire to share it with her. The irony was almost poetic. Now that I finally had something to offer, I no longer felt the need to prove it. Later that night, as I got back to my apartment, I found something unexpected outside my door. A small, padded envelope. I frowned, not expecting any packages. I opened it and immediately recognized her handwriting on the note inside. A letter. My pulse quickened, not out of longing, but because I knew this was no coincidence. I sat down on my sofa and slowly unfolded it. I know you don't want to talk to me, it began. I get it, but I need you to know the truth. I let out a short, humorless laugh. The truth. How interesting. I kept reading. Blake isn't who I thought he was. And there it was. The beginning of the end. My eyes scanned the page faster. At first, everything was perfect. The trips, the gifts, the dinners. But then, slowly, he started to change. Of course, he did. Stories like this always have a second act. He became controlling. He questioned who I talked to, where I went, even what I wore. My jaw tightened. Not with jealousy, but with a grim sense of recognition. I'd seen this pattern before in other people's lives, but I never thought it would be hers. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just stress from his job, but it got worse. The words grew more desperate. He would belittle me, humiliate me, make me feel small. I stopped reading. That last phrase, make me feel small, the exact same feeling she had left me with. The universe has a twisted sense of humor, and that's when I understood what I'd lost. I closed my eyes for a second. There was the regret. Always too late. You. The words sat alone on the page. The sound of my own breathing filled the room. I continued. I never appreciated who you were, what we had. My hands were steady. Not anymore. I know I don't deserve another chance, she wrote. Well, at least she was self-aware. But I had to try. The final line left me motionless. Because no one ever made me feel the way you did. I slowly folded the letter, placed it on the coffee table, and just sat there, thinking. Not about her, but about myself. About the man I was then and the man I was now. Because that letter would have been a lifeline to the old me. That man would have run to her, would have forgiven everything, would have gone back. But that man was gone. Still, it wasn't that simple. A tiny, almost invisible part of me still remembered, still felt a flicker of something, and that was dangerous. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights sparkled differently now. Or maybe it was me who was different. My phone vibrated. An unknown number. I answered. Hello. A pause. Then her voice, tentative and fragile. It's me. I closed my eyes. This was it. Real. Not a letter, not a memory. I know you don't want to talk, but please, just hear me out. I took a slow, deep breath. I had two choices. Hang up, or face this once and for all. You're on the clock, I said finally. I had no idea that conversation was about to change everything. I don't even know where to begin. Her voice was trembling. I leaned against the wall, my gaze lost in the city skyline. Start with the end, I replied. It's usually more honest. A long, heavy silence stretched between us. It's over, she finally said. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sadness. Just a quiet void. And I prompted. And I was wrong. About everything. About you. Direct. To the point. I already knew that, I said, my tone flat. I heard her sharp intake of breath. The old me would have softened the blow. Not this me. You don't understand, she insisted. I thought I knew what I wanted. Security, stability. But what I found was a cage. I closed my eyes for a second. Cage. Another loaded word. So what do you want now? I asked. Her answer was barely a whisper. I want to see you. I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. No. Silence. Please. That word again. It held no power over me anymore. No, I repeated. What we had ended the day you decided to lie to me for 2 months. My voice was solid. It didn't crack, it didn't waver, and that seemed to disarm her more than anything. I know, she said, her words tumbling out. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I need to see you, to explain in person. I sighed, not out of weakness, but out of a sudden, stark clarity. She wasn't calling because she loved me. She was calling because she was desperate. And that changes the entire equation. Let me ask you something, I said. If Blake had been the perfect guy, if he'd given you everything you thought you wanted, would you be making this call right now? The silence on the other end was immediate and deafening. It was an answer in itself. No, she finally admitted, her voice choked. And there it was. The raw, unvarnished truth. Then you're not choosing me, I stated, not as a question, but as a fact. You're just running away from him. I could hear her start to sob. It's not like that, Yes, it is, I cut her off. And the worst part is, you don't even see it. I ended the call without another word, without a goodbye. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It was filled with control. My control. I collapsed onto the sofa, looking up at the ceiling. My heart was pounding, but not for her. It was pounding from the adrenaline of what I'd just done. For the first time, I had chosen myself. The following days were strangely peaceful. She didn't call again, didn't text, as if she'd finally gotten the message, or perhaps had just given up. I moved on. My responsibilities at work grew, and so did my projects on the side. I started making more money than I had ever thought possible. I moved into a new apartment, bigger, more modern, a place that was entirely mine. Every decision I made was deliberate, not to prove a point to anyone, but to build a life that wasn't dependent on someone else's approval. A life that couldn't be shattered by a goodbye. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. One afternoon, I was leaving the office and I saw her. I wasn't ready for it. She was standing across the street, looking hesitant. She wasn't wearing the expensive clothes or the perfect makeup from her photos with Blake. She just looked different. More real. More fragile. She froze when our eyes met, as if she hadn't expected me to actually exist outside of her phone. I stopped too, not out of shock, but out of a detached curiosity. I crossed the street, my steps even and unhurried. Hello, Madison, I said, my voice neutral. That seemed to hit her harder than any insult would have. Hi, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. We stood in silence for a few awkward seconds, two strangers assessing the ruins of a shared past. You look good, she finally said. I nodded. You too, I lied. Her eyes welled up. Thanks for not just walking away. Don't misinterpret this, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm not opening a door for you. I'm just being civil, direct, clear. No room for false hope. She swallowed hard. I know, but she didn't leave. Can we just talk for a minute? I glanced at my watch. I could say no. I could walk away, and it would probably be the smart thing to do. But a part of me needed to close this chapter, once and for all, on my own terms. 5 minutes, I said. She nodded quickly, like I'd offered her the world. We sat on a nearby park bench. The air was cool, but not as cold as the space between us. I've been thinking a lot, she began. About everything. About what I did to you. I let her speak, curious to see where this would go. I was selfish, and a coward, and so stupid. A blunt assessment. Yes, I agreed. I didn't soften it. Her lip trembled, but she pressed on. I thought the money and the lifestyle were what mattered. That it would make me happy. But I was so wrong. I watched her, my expression unreadable. You weren't wrong, I said. You chose exactly what you wanted at the time. She looked confused. But now you don't like the consequences. I finished for her. Another silence. She took a shaky breath. I miss you. There it was. The phrase that once would have undone me, but now landed with no impact. You miss how I made you feel, I corrected gently. No. She shook her head, insistent. I miss you. I allowed myself a small, sad smile. You don't even know who I am anymore. And that was the absolute truth. She fell silent, studying my face as if trying to find the man she once knew. She couldn't. He was gone. Just give me another chance, she pleaded, her voice breaking. And in that moment, time seemed to stop. The city noise, the people walking by, all of it faded away. This was the question, the real test, and my answer would define everything that came next. I held her gaze for a long time. 5 seconds, 10, maybe 20. The world around us was muted. Her expression was a raw mix of hope and desperation. And yet, something inside me, a core of steel I had forged in the fire of her betrayal, remained unmoved. There are no more chances, I said finally, my voice quiet but unyielding. Not because I can't forgive you, but because the life I've built for myself. You're no longer a part of it. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a fleeting instant, the old instinct to comfort her rose up. But then I remembered. Every lie, every excuse, every hollow I love you. Please, she whispered, her voice cracking. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. It wasn't hate or revenge. It was a profound sense of my own power. The power to write my own story. Listen to me, I said, leaning forward slightly, making sure she met my eyes. You learned a lesson, a very painful one. But it's your lesson to learn, not mine to fix. She tried to speak, but I held up a hand. The man you left months ago doesn't exist anymore. That man crumpled on the floor of our apartment, thinking his life was over. That man was weak. I am not him. She was trembling now, tears streaming down her face, but they had lost their power over me. Look at me, I went on. This life, this job, everything you see now. I built it on the wreckage you left behind. Your betrayal, the pain, your abandonment, all of it became the fuel that forced me to become stronger, to take control of my life without depending on anyone. I held her gaze for one last moment. Then I stood up and turned my back. I walked away without looking back, each step a firm reminder that the past no longer had a hold on me. Goodbye, Madison, I said, loud enough for only me to hear. Behind me, I could faintly hear her sobbing my name. But I was already in a different world. In the weeks that followed, everything solidified. The last vestiges of pain were gone, replaced by a clear-headed focus. My career flourished, my life expanded, and my mind was finally free. There was no nostalgia, no what-ifs, just the quiet satisfaction of a life well built. And then, the most ironic moment of all arrived. A call from an unknown number. Hello. It's Blake, the voice on the other end said, tight with stress. I need to talk to you. A small, sharp smile touched my lips. Go on, I replied. Why are you calling me? A pause. Because everything is a mess. Madison. She's not doing well. She keeps talking about. I let out a soft laugh, cutting him off. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, my voice so calm it must have unnerved him. But that is no longer my problem. It was a perfect, beautiful moment. The entire cycle of betrayal, all that negative energy had finally boomeranged back to its source. As I hung up, a strange sense of peace washed over me. It wasn't joy at their misery, but the simple, profound knowledge that sometimes the universe does balance its own books. That night, I stood at my window, looking at my reflection against the glittering city skyline. The lights were bright, the future was mine, and I understood something with a clarity I'd never had before. True victory isn't about revenge or making someone hurt. It's about outgrowing the pain, about transforming yourself so completely that the person who broke you is left staring at a stranger. Because when she came back, she didn't find the man she left. She found someone else. Someone who no longer needed her validation, who was no longer afraid, and who could look at the past without a single regret. And that is the most powerful thing in the world. For the first time in a very, very long time, I smiled. A real smile. Not for her, not for Blake. Just for me. Because I was finally whole. And though the story felt complete, there was one more piece I didn't see coming. Something that would close the loop for good. Months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, I was walking through the park near my office when I saw her again. This time there was no desperation in her eyes, no tears, no fear. It was just her, watching me from a distance. My heart didn't pound. There was no pang of nostalgia. Just a quiet curiosity. I walked toward her, not with anger or anxiety, but with the calm confidence I had earned through sleepless nights and hard-won victories. "Hello," I said simply. She looked at me, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Her eyes were clear, but filled with a deep, settled regret. "I made a terrible mistake," she whispered, her voice free of the drama it held before. "I didn't know how to value what we had. Everything with Blake. It was an illusion. I see now what I really lost." I listened silently. Her words were like a distant storm that had already passed. I was no longer in its path. "I know," I said finally. "But that doesn't change anything." Her gaze searched mine, not for a second chance, but maybe for a hint of forgiveness, a shred of hope. There was none I could offer. "Please," she said, though the word was different now. It wasn't a desperate plea. It was a quiet, defeated acknowledgement of her new reality. "Just give me another chance." I stopped and took a deep breath, looking at the person in front of me. "Madison," I began. "Months ago, you were my whole world. You broke me in a way I didn't think was possible. You made me feel worthless. But I refused to let that be the end of my story. I got up, I rebuilt myself. And I became someone I never would have been otherwise. And now I can't go back. I can't be the man you left behind." She swallowed hard, understanding finally dawning in her eyes. "I can change," she insisted weakly. A soft, ironic smile touched my lips. "I already have. But I did it for me, not for you." Her shoulders slumped in defeat. "There are no second chances when trust is broken like that," I said, my voice softer now, more instructive than angry. "There are only lessons. And this is yours." She stood in silence, unable to argue. Finally, she lowered her gaze. "I wish you the best," she said, her voice barely audible. "Thank you," I replied. "You too." And with that, I turned around and walked away. Each step was a steady, rhythmic beat marking the cadence of my new life. There was no looking back, no lingering regrets, because I had finally learned the most important lesson of all. It doesn't matter who walks out on you, or how they make you feel. What truly matters is who you decide to become in their absence. The man I was before no longer existed. In his place stood someone stronger, wiser, and completely free. And no one, not her, not Blake, not anyone, could ever take that away from me. I closed my eyes for a second, took a deep breath of the cool air, and kept walking. My life was finally, irrevocably my own. Comment: I want to take a moment to talk to all of you about the real takeaway from today's video. Going through heartbreak or betrayal is incredibly painful, but it is also a powerful opportunity to discover your true strength. We cannot control how others treat us, but we absolutely have the power to decide how we respond and what boundaries we set. Real victory is never about seeking revenge or trying to make someone else hurt. Instead, it is about taking all that negative energy and using it to build a life that makes you genuinely proud. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to simply walk away from toxicity and choose your own peace of mind. Always remember that your value is not defined by someone else's inability to see your worth. Treat yourself with kindness during the healing process, and take responsibility for your own happiness. I hope this encourages you to keep moving forward, especially if you are currently facing a difficult season in your life. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.